Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time to review Promising Young Woman, directed by Emerald Fennell, starring Carey Mulligan. The movie's about a woman who is trying to get revenge and retribution for the sexual crimes that men commit. It's kind of genre bendy in a way that you really can't put the movie into a box. You have some comedy, some very dark comedy, scenes that are like a little bit like scary. There's definitely a thriller element to it. It is very entertaining. It keeps you on your toes. It kind of goes one direction. You think like, okay, is it like now we're in this tone? And then it goes in the other direction. It's like, oh, okay, we're back in this tone. I was just not disappointed with this one. To me, this is like this year's Get Out. Get Out, was a movie that people considered like, okay, maybe it's like a little flawed or weird. Like it's kind of hard to wrap your head around some of the things. And, there are maybe some choices in the movie that are hard to understand. But this movie is one of those that like puts the entire culture, the entire system, and even like maybe you and I or people we know on trial. It's possibly the only movie I've really seen that shows you the underbelly of how men like treat women and the whole like culture that supports it. Other Me Too movies, you could say, like Bombshell, they kind of leave it where there's like one really scary bad guy. And, once you take him down, like you can feel better about things. And there's heroes in that sense. And this film is much more like ambiguous. There's so much more to like salivate on and eat up. The character being like as sort of complex as she is, not fitting into one box of like whether they are good or bad. And then just the male characters, watching them like defend their positions in a way that I actually feel like is kind of realistic. It's just honest about the whole problem we have in so many ways. It's definitely trying to be like this sort of slap in the face to America, kind of in the way that Get Out was, where it tackles an issue very directly in a way that most movies aren't willing to do. And the movie's very challenging about it. Like, you're gonna feel conflicted about some things in this movie. I think I was more conflicted the first time I saw this film earlier in the year, but revisiting it, I actually really welcome the ways in which this movie is challenging, the ways in which it could make you feel like angry or frustrated. And the movie's tackling, rape culture in a sort of multifaceted takedown where it kind of hits it at all the angles, like the institutions that promote it, bystanders, the perpetrators. And at the center of it, we have Carey Mulligan's character, and the movie wouldn't work if this character didn't feel so real. At first, she kind of seems like this out for revenge, like badass girl. But really, there's a sort of facade there, of course. And she feels like a real human. She could have just been one track minded, like, no, I'm going to get this at all costs, and just sort of becomes like a drone that just does these things. And she's not. Like, she's much more vulnerable than that, which is a really interesting choice for the character. It's much more of like a polished version of that character than others would have dared to do, I guess. Yeah, I think that's what makes the movie feel at least somewhat organic, where it could have almost felt like, it's trying to touch on the issues so hard that it kind of loses its own voice. I actually don't think that the movie does that. And I think it does that through like, a genuine exploration of this main character. This story like is so universal. It's actually ridiculous how many people have like that someone who it's like they got away with doing this to me or somebody I know, and they're just out there living their lives, and they may or may not like care, or maybe they're not even like aware of the suffering that they're causing. But this is just sort of like the culture we live in. We have like all of this unresolved like anger towards these people, and there doesn't seem to be a very easy way to like tackle it. And I don't think there's really like a way that the film presents like answers for how to address that, but it's definitely about a woman's search for accountability. And I think the answer it approaches, if any, is like, we need acknowledgement, like that these things happen. We just are tired of people like kind of denying that these things took place. And so in a way, like this person's really out for like accountability in just whatever way she can get it. It really does make you think about how we have to like approach this as a society. Like I said, it just really rips away the curtain. And also what our priorities are. Are we more interested in protecting reputations than we are protecting women? That's also a question that this film poses. And it does all this in a way that is entertaining, sometimes fun, sometimes funny, Other times will, leave you with like a feeling in your gut. Or at times I thought it was like really suspenseful, like my heart was pounding. At times, like really emotional. I think a lot of people are going to have really different reactions to this, but I had a stronger emotional reaction to this film on the second viewing. I think the end is a perfect way to leave the audience feeling unresolved and for the discussion to continue as you leave the theater. My actual only like real problem with the movie is maybe the ending. I won't say what it is, but I just don't know if that needed to happen. And I could imagine the movie being just as good without that happening. The note that it ends on is like hard to swallow based on the thing I'm talking about. But I also don't think it's a bad ending. It still works really well. And I like you said, I like the tone that it hits in the very end. I just think it's something that will hold some people back from like really loving the movie or feeling like it completely works for them. There are like a couple things that I don't feel 100% on with this movie, but I could see it becoming like some sort of classic, honestly. Like, this is not a movie that's gonna fade away. Yeah, I also think it will become like kind of a modern classic. I know Twitter like loves it right now. Letterboxd loves it. And I love it. Going on a lot of top 10s, as it should be. It's a kind of a risk to make a movie that's so bold and direct about that and the way that it mirrors society. But, this movie goes like kind of head first with that approach. The direction is really stylish. It has like this sort of candy-coated aesthetic. Not like exactly sure if there's any greater meaning to that or if it's just the aesthetic. Either way, has a good soundtrack. And we barely even mentioned the performances. Carey Mulligan is really amazing in this film. As I mentioned earlier, the character sort of has different dimensions to her, but I found myself really rooting for like the real Cassie to flourish. And that became such a big part of why I felt like emotional towards the end of this film. I just think Carey Mulligan brings so much to this character, and it's really difficult to imagine anybody else in the role. Oscar nomination incoming. We hope so. We hope so. And I agree with you. The thing that she brings to the role is really like that humanity. What sits with us is like how upsetting, this is for this real person to go through something like this. And she makes you empathize. Everybody in the supporting cast is very good as well. Bo Burnham particularly does a very good job. Yeah. Like his scene at the end, I remember watching and being like, wow, his facial expressions are like great here. He's very, very good. I feel like not a lot of people could have pulled off the level of charm that this character exhibits, in most of the movie. And I think generally everybody who had a scene opposite Carey Mulligan was like really good. I actually slightly disagree. There were a couple scenes, but I think it was more of the direction where like the person opposite Carey Mulligan like didn't feel like, or the reactions were like proportionate. But that was just a couple like small scenes that I felt that. And so we know Carey Mulligan is probably going to get nominated. She's looking good. If she didn't get nominated, it would be a Jake Gyllenhaal level snub. She's getting lots of critic awards, and the movie's doing really well with screenplay. I think that it could even be a movie people discuss to win potentially. I think the movie could get picture. And if the movie gets picture, could the movie get director? And these are honestly things that I think might happen. You did not say this after Sundance, though. So why? Well, I was wrong about The Father, too. It caught fire. Get Out premiered really early in the year, and people didn't really think it was going to be a thing. I have a hard time predicting how well this movie's really going to do. Maybe outside of screenplay and actress. There's a demographic difference between like Twitter and the Academy, and also critics in the Academy. But I have to imagine that it's going to do pretty well with audience scores. I think it's in the 90s for Rotten Tomatoes audience. I don't know why it would be low. Yeah, so it's doing pretty well. I'm really, really rooting for it. It's performing really well if we tally up the critics groups. Emerald Fennell is getting like a good amount of director nominations, and the movie's getting plenty of nominations. It's a snowball, and it's coming. And I think I might like have the movie in my top 10 for picture, and I'm considering putting it on for director. I agree that if the movie's a picture contender, it can get director, because the directing in this movie is very, very good. Like, it's kind of the same as Get Out, where it's like, okay, this is a new voice. Like, I need the next movie. Like, I really do need the next movie she's going to make. Everything about like the set design to the camera work and like the tone and the music, like it was so well put together. And I definitely jizzed during the movie. I really can't wait to see what she does next. And I hope to God she gets nominated. This would be like my number one on the ballot.
I'm thinking of anything.
That's not it's not a contender of the Oscars, really.
You can have
I'm saying like of what could possibly be nominated. If it gets nominated for picture or director, I'll scream.
No, it would be great.
But I even think that it might not get nominated for actress. I actually think
come the fuck on.
I know, I understand.
Carey Mulligan hasn't been nominated since In Education. She needs more nominations.
I get if the ending like threw you for a loop a little bit. But I would definitely encourage you, like, I actually snuck back into the movie theater to catch the ending one more time while I was in News of the World because I knew News of the World wasn't going to be, like, that great. I was kind of in the middle of it. And I was, like, more accepting of the ending and more embracing of it. And I kind of answered some of the questions I had, some of the hang-ups. It's interesting because it's a movie where I can feel, like, kind of two ways about it. I can feel, like, satisfied and also feel, like, the weight that this character is like bringing around and the sadness of that. This is like a stick with you movie that I don't think people will forget. I think it needs a little bit of time to like grow and there'll be people like pushing for it. Whatever you feel about it, it's a damn important one. It's a damn ambitious one. And Emerald Fennell, what a debut.
At Sundance, I gave it an 8, but I think that what happened there was a lot in this movie between like the plot twist that it goes down, the ending. I had a lot of feelings. I didn't know what to make of them, but here, a second viewing, I feel more resolved, if you could even feel resolved about the movie, and I like it a margin more. I think it's one of the best of the year. I think even a third watch, like maybe I would even like it more, perhaps.
I would gladly watch this again.
I'm going to give it a very good 9 out of 10.
I'm going to give it a 10.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
What's your promise?